Is that something that you're going to take on guarding Donovan for the Georgia position?
Yeah, I'm used to it. I'm used to this. Y'all ain't met playoff P yet. I'm used to these matchups. I'm used to playing against the best offensive guy during these moments. So, you know, that'll be my role. Not to say Corey won't guard him, but that'll definitely be my role, especially late in games, is to take that matchup.
What is playoff PG like?
Man, it's a fun guy to watch. You know? It's an out-of-body person where I just lock in and put myself into a different zone.
Paul George entering the 2018 playoffs against the Utah Jazz and Donovan Mitchell gave himself the nickname Playoff P. And let's just say he has not lived up to expectations. Since announcing Playoff P, Paul George has arguably been one of the worst playoff performers I've seen in quite a long time. This is supposedly a 3-and-D wing who can shot create, average around 24, easy to get 30 at any given night, and apparently he lamp shit, but I think his defense is overrated. Regardless, he's still good at it. In fact, I think it's safe to say he's pretty above average, to say quite the least. Now, except for that wild-ass run where y'all really had him third place in DPOY and MVP voting, Paul George is typically around the top 10 to 15 player in the league, 10 being at highest. In short, he's not exactly James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Durant, and LeBron James, but he's certainly a good number 2 option. However, when Paul George was traded to LA, the takes on Paul George kinda got out of hand. For example, they even dare say that Kawhi Leonard and Paul George were a better duo than LeBron James and Anthony Davis. No, I'm not going to turn this to a Battle of LA video. I'm just going to simply put that Anthony Davis is substantially better than Paul George. LeBron James is substantially better than Paul George. They're not in the same class. That shouldn't have never been a thing. But I find those takes crazy, and now everybody's slandering Paul George when he's been like this since announcing Playoff P. Because literally in the series that he announced Playoff P, he actually lost in 6 games to rookie Donovan Mitchell in the Utah Jazz, stating that he would guard Donovan Mitchell most of the series, and he actually ended up fulfilling that promise. However, Donovan Mitchell did average a good 28.5 points and shot 46% from the field, shooting 36.4% from 3. Yeah, it wasn't exactly the best defensive showcase I've seen, but then if you go to the offensive end, it gets worse. Because yes, he did average around 25 points, but it was on 40% shooting. And Playoff P did have a phenomenal debut where Paul George did put up 36.7 assists on 8 of 11 shooting from 3 and 13 from 20 shooting from the field. However, and it's just no other way to put it, he was terrible in Game 6. He had 5 points, 6 turnovers. He shot the ball 16 times and he only made it twice. 0 of 6 from the 3-point line. Bro wasn't playing no defense. Bro wasn't getting buckets. Bro was getting that cardio in. And when you give him the notion that he simply had the more talented roster, you can think Utah is better schematically or whatever, but the talent on OKC was ridiculous, with Steven Adams being their 3rd best player and his co-star being Russell Westbrook, if you don't even think Russell Westbrook is better than Paul George. Simply put, there was no excuse to lose that series, and especially to a rookie Donovan Mitchell, who you said you were going to guard and lock up. But that was just one series. Let's go to the next season where he faced Portland in the first round. Again, before it started, Oklahoma City was definitely favored, as they still have Russell Westbrook, Paul George, and Steven Adams. They did lose Carmelo Anthony though, but at the time everyone thought he sucked for some reason. It made 0 sense. But yeah, that happened. And he did show a marginal improvement in this series. As in the 2019 season against the Portland Trailblazers, Paul George would average 29 points, 4 assists, 9 rebounds on 43% shooting from the field and 32 from 3. Not phenomenal, but it's better than most players and certainly isn't a travesty, right? Oh no, not at all. Let's give it some context. I'd be a hater if I didn't acknowledge how great Paul George was in Game 5. Game 5, Paul George had 36 points, 3 of 8 from the 3, but he was 14 of 20 from the field. He also complemented that with 9 rebounds. Simply put, a great performance. A loss, but a great performance. However, if you simply remove Game 5 from these averages, Playoff P has entered the chat. Because in Games 1 through 4, Paul George still averaged 27 points. However, it was on 37% from the field and 30 from 3. Every 20 shots, bro scored 7 times. His best game of that stretch easily being where he had 27 points on 55% shooting from, where he did also have 5 turnovers. Now let's pause for one moment in time, because you may have heard me say he shot 70% in Game 5 and 55 in Game 2, and like, how the hell did his average dip down all the way to 43 in the series? Well, in Games 1, 3, and 4, simply put, your man's was hot garbage. Again, he averaged 28 points, on 31% shooting from the field, shot the ball 61 times, only made it 19 times, and totaled 85 points. And funny enough, the game he shot 3 of 16, the Thunder won. And again, this was during a regular season which people said he was better than Russell Westbrook, a season where he was ranked around the top 10 once again, and a season where he lost to a team that they probably should have beat. And I'm not disrespecting Dame, I know he really came on in the 2019 season, but Dame today and Dame last year are not the same nigga at all. And it's like with Paul George, the thing that irritates me the most is that people just brush this off. Like, this is a major flaw in someone's game who isn't a James Harden level talent that is brushed off. For example, in those corny little start one, bench one, cut ones that niggas do, Klay Thompson and Jimmy Butler will be on there and people will be like, what the hell, Paul George, man? And again, on those, it's never exactly who you pick, as the person who posted obviously acknowledges that they're all around the same talent unless they're on some troll stuff, but most of the time they're around the same level of talent. However, it's the way that people definitively pick Paul George and the condescending nature of it, like how dare you compare Paul George to these players. And yeah, it's cool to slander Playoff P on Twitter and stuff, but we all know that this is going to be overblown by the next offseason. So I'm going to just say what I gotta say. Paul George does not defend better than Jimmy Butler. Paul George is a good defender. He's not this crazy elite defender, okay? When I think of elite lockdown defender, my mind goes to guys like Kawhi Leonard, Marcus Smart, Giannis, Anthony Davis, list goes on. Is Paul George good at defense? Yes, significantly above average, but you're not going to tell me he's an elite defender. Paul George isn't half the defender any of the guys I just named are. The way I view Paul George's defense, I don't view it any higher than Klay Thompson's. In fact, I think Klay defend better than that nigga, but I'll let y'all have this. And offensively, at his peak, Paul George is a one-of-a-kind offensive talent. That's not even a question. I actually would say Paul George is a really underrated shooter, and with his size and athleticism, he can get wherever he needs to be on the court. But the thing about Playoff P, which is why it's a big meme at this point, is consistency and timing does matter. Because literally right now, Paul George is averaging 17 points on 18 shots. That is unacceptable by all metrics. There's no excuse for it. And if you watch the game, it's one of two things. Either he's just simply missing open shots, or he's making life a lot harder for himself. And I'll close with this because here's my ideology on players as a unit. It really comes down to a peak versus consistency argument, and here's my stance. I actually do value peak more than consistency. There are levels to the game, and there is such a thing as streakiness. And people often make really immature and ignorant arguments with it, but I think if there's a level that no other player or most of the players around you cannot reach when you are at your best, I think that matters for something. And obviously it has to be with a level of consistency, not complete consistency like to the level of like a LeBron James or something, but it has to be a sustained period of time. It can't be no insanity or like how Dion Waiters is hot every other game. It can't be nothing like that. But to give you a brief example, even though Playoff P is such a terrible player, I would still take Paul George over Jimmy Butler, because when Paul George is actually playing like Paul George, he is a substantially better player. I doubt that's too much of a debate. At worst, he's a slight step down in defense, but he's a much better offensive player, a much better shooter. It's just not even a debate at the offensive end, quite honestly. But when you get to a guy like Klay Thompson, for example, that's where things change. First of all, Klay might get his own video because we don't even know who is better at their peak. Let's start from there. That may be a little spicy take or whatever, but that's really not. Klay Thompson at his best is insane. A lot of people will go to the route of, oh, Klay can't create his own shot. He needs to catch and shoot. I mean, true, but does Paul George essentially show you the fact that he can come down the court and consistently get offense? If Paul George had that level of talent and intangibles, Paul George would be leading his own team and he'd be like a top 5 player in the world. He can do it every now and then, but to a consistent level, it is dog shit. Like, it's not even, he can't consistently do it. And considering his peak is not substantially higher than Klay's, if it even is at all, I'm definitely taking Klay Thompson of the two because I know I don't have a playoff Klay to deal with. But unfortunately, what typically happens in sports fandom is things are overblown and forgotten. At some point in time, all of the playoff P memes will become just simple hating and unnecessary criticism. There'll probably be some trending Pacer highlights and some 2018 Thunder highlights coming up soon. And all of the Paul George's top 10, top 8 takes will fly back just for the playoffs to soon arrive and the same shit to happen, and the cycle continues on and on and on. I don't know if it's because of how he looks. I don't know if it's because of his game, how flashy it is, but people need to hold this dude accountable, yo. Because this is a conversation that's gonna sound disrespectful but needs to be had. Like, he's around the level of a guy like Jason Tatum. Donovan Mitchell did beat him in the first round, and that's easily dismissed. Devin Booker has elevated his own game. game. And do I even need to mention Damian Lillard right now? I know I said I was going to conclude earlier in the vid, but I got carried away, man. I love the game of basketball. I love to talk about it. But I promise you I'm ending with this. From a roster top to bottom, Paul George is in simply the best roster spot a second star could be in the NBA. With Lou Williams and Trez off the bench combined with the phenomenal starting lineup and Kawhi Leonard being a proven finals MVP, along with other role players that play substantial defense, can hit a 3-ball, and of course a Hall of Fame coach in Doc Rivers. Simply put, there's no excuse for this guy. He has to ball. He has to just make his open shots. Because without the injury to Luka Doncic last night, it looked like that series was going to a good 6 or 7. And if his name wasn't Paul George, if his name was Danny Green, for example, he'd be eviscerated. He needs to simply hit open shots. He's wide open. The team is going to work. The team is better. You are on a great team, Paul George. Make your open shots, bro. They're real live calling this man Pandemic P now. Like, this shit is hilarious. I'm a Lakers fan. I hope he does keep missing. But in all actuality, and if I have to not be a biased Laker fan, bro just simply has to hit his shots. There's no explanation for it. Stop being one of the worst playoff performers I've seen in a long time, because it's just hard to watch at this point, man. And it's making you look and seem very overrated. On that note, that's going to be the end of this video. Please don't forget to rate, comment, share, subscribe. It's been your boy TSO Sage. Again, subby sub. We on the road to 100, and I'm going to see y'all later.